Question 1 on the board here, Dennis is asking, is it true that cortisol lowers testosterone? And the answer, simply put, is yes. It's absolutely true. And so this, let's delineate, because this is especially true of prescription cortisol. So high doses of cortisol over time, we know lowers the production of testosterone in humans. We also know that cortisol, there's some other effects. It increases blood pressure, which was also going to affect you sexually. Elevations in blood pressure can create sexual dysfunction in many ways. We know that it's going to increase blood sugar. An elevation in blood sugar is going to affect blood viscosity, or the thickness of your blood, and that when that's impacted or when that's affected, it puts more pressure on your vascular tree. Again, this part of this is the blood pressure problem, but the other aspect is your heart has to work harder to pump that blood to the distal tissue. And so these are just some of the side effects of cortisol. Cortisol also, as it lowers testosterone, it reduces your muscle mass. And, if we're talking about reduction in muscle mass, one of the things that, especially that's healthy and important for men, is that the more lean muscle mass you have, right, the better off you're going to be with your testosterone. So if you're taking prescription cortisol for whatever reason, maybe it's to lower pain, a lot of doctors will dispense cortisol to reduce pain, like joint pain, et cetera, muscle pain. And if they do it long term, and it's not so bad if it's a one-time dose, very short term, but when you're going back over and over, taking oral cortisol on the regular, you're going to reduce your muscle mass, you're going to increase your blood pressure, increase your blood sugar, and you're going to wreck your sex life. And then when you get to a point where your muscle mass is so low, and then you try to go back and exercise, you're going to get injured, and then you're going to be in pain again, and you're going to be kind of following this, chasing your tail. So that's one element of cortisol. Now, you may not have prescription cortisol, so let's just remove the RX from that. And let's say that you're over-consuming gluten and you're gluten sensitive. That cortisol is going to go up to supraphysiological levels. And the reason why is cortisol is basically it's a hormone that helps your body cope with inflammation, helps you adapt to inflammation. It kind of, in a sense, what it's designed to do is it's designed to help you fight inflammation. That's why doctors prescribe it as an anti-inflammatory. And so what happens is, if you're chronically inflamed because of your dietary choices, your cortisol is going to go up much in the same way as it would go up if you were taking artificial cortisol from a prescription drug. And these same impacts you're going to have, the increased blood pressure, the increased blood sugar, the reduction in muscle mass, and reduction in overall testosterone production. So cortisol is a bad idea. Cortisol is a catabolic stress steroid, and we only really want to have high levels of cortisol when we're under acute stress. And so this is one of the reasons why chronic stress is such a killer, because it leads to heightened levels of cortisol over expanded periods of time long term. That's just a bad idea. You don't want that. So hopefully that helped you out, Dennis. Let's see here. Can gluten be a reason for erection problems with condoms? Not sure I understand the exact nature of the question. Are you asking me if condoms contain gluten, or are you asking me if on top of condoms, if gluten can also pose a problem for erections? And I just take the condoms out of that equation and just answer it very simply, that gluten can definitely be a problem for erection, for full erection. Let's see here. Not tonight, honey. I'm stressed from work. Check back tomorrow night. Hopefully I'll be back to normal. Yeah, that's somebody's commentary. That's a common, again, cliche, but it's true, right? Let's see. How come I only get migraines when I eat cheese or chocolate? Because cheese and chocolate contain different compounds that are probably migraine triggers for you. Very curious about the LGBTQ thing. I personally feel transgender since a little child, but have never done anything about it. I just identify as a lesbian now, but I just found out I am gluten sensitive. So I'm curious on your thoughts. If there is a relation to how my brain feels, is it really my choice and it's nothing I feel like I can control? So yeah, I mean, yeah, we don't know, Laura. That's the whole thing. I don't want anybody in the LGBT community to feel like what I'm saying is that because you ate gluten when you were developing as an adolescent, that's why you feel the way that you feel. That's not what my intentions are. But I think it's important to those of us who have children that are raising those children to understand that gluten plays a role and impacts the nature of sexual development. And so certainly and plausibly, intelligently, we can state that that's something that you definitely want to be concerned with as a parent. But today, as an adult woman, whether or not that was playing a role in your development, it's impossible to go back in a time machine and understand or identify whether that's happening. But again, I just think it's important that people understand it as they move forward. What are the best conventional labs to identify estrogen dominance? Conventional labs is you would just look at estrogen and total estrogen, estradiol, estrone, and estriol. Those are the four primary types of estrogen that the body produces, and you want to look at all of them. You'd also want to look at a compound called SHBG, sex hormone binding globulin. Also very important to look at. Elevations in sex hormone binding globulin, SHBG for short, can cause a binding of sex steroids or sex hormones and create dysfunction in that way. But looking at estrogen through those four, E1, E2, E3, and total estrogen, but also looking at progesterone and also looking at testosterone, all those things are important to look at if you're really trying to get an understanding of what your sex hormones are doing and trying to get an identity on whether or not there's an estrogen to progesterone ratio abnormality leading to the symptoms of estrogen dominance. Can non-alcoholic fatty liver cause vitamin D supplementation intolerance? I feel more spacey taking vitamin D supplement. No, I would say not in my experience. That's not to say that it may not be happening to you, but in my experience, fatty liver disease is not causing a person to be incapable of supplementing with vitamin D successfully. There's maybe a lot more there to unwrap and unpack, but without more information would be hard to do. Exocrine pancreatic insufficiency underdiagnosed, potential cause for vitamin D. Okay, not a question. Is there a cutoff age at which the removal of gluten returns function back to somewhat normal? No, Barb, I like that question too, because so many people think, I'm too old, and so that's, it's beyond me. I should have this dysfunction, and I shouldn't have a quality sex life. And that, I would say, I would discourage anyone from trying to buy into that mantra, because your body can heal no matter what age you are. I've seen some amazing things in the elderly after going gluten-free. I've seen some massive turnarounds. Like I said earlier, I've seen women who thought they were already through menopause and beyond it actually regain their cycle back by changing their diet. So, I'm more of the call me the optimist, but I don't think you should ever think about age as a factor in your dysfunction, at least not as an excuse to not achieving good function. Can gluten cause difficulties in orgasms in men? Yes, that's a good question, Mike. And it's funny on the research with that, one of the issues, because gluten is known to cause erectile dysfunction, it's also known to cause vascular problems for men. And when that happens to a man, it gets in their head, right? It creates a psychological problem. So now it becomes two problems. It's a physiological problem, but it's also a psychological problem. Because once a man's sex life is impacted that way, they're going to have, in a sense, many of them will have almost like a post-traumatic stress toward having sex. And so then that stress actually impacts the quality of their sex pleasure, their sexual pleasure and desire, etc. So definitely can impact a man in that way, both physiologically and then subsequently psychologically after the fact. So Mary says, how do I ask a question? I've never been able to ask a question. You ask it in the chat box, Mary. I got your question here. If you've got questions specifically about some of our supplements, though, I would encourage you. I don't want to make this show a Q&A about supplements that you're using right now, but I also don't want to deter you from getting your questions answered. Reach out to glutenology@gmail.com if you've got specific questions about some of the supplements that you're taking, and Jessica there at Glutenology can help you out and get you those answers. Let's see here. Is it true that dark chocolate is essential for good sex? I would say no, it's not essential for good sex, but it can act as a type of aphrodisiac. Does gluten genetic test have the same or more detail than a wheat zimmer? Much more detail if you're wanting to know about gluten and your genetic propensity to react to it. Wheat zimmer has zero information about the genetic propensity, so I would say much more detail. How long does it take to get gluten out of your system? Gluten, in terms of eating gluten, how long does it take for it to pass through your GI tract? For most people, anywhere from 12 to 48 hours. That's how long it takes to traverse through the gut and out of you. Now, how long does it take for the gluten damage to calm down? Gluten antibodies have a half-life of 2 to 3 months, so you're looking at several months for the damage that gluten is causing to fully get out of your system. So it just depends on how you're asking that question, Stella. Let's see, let's go down on the left. My husband was diagnosed. Could that be linked to? Could Peyronie's disease be linked to gluten? Yes. It could be, and definitely worth investigating. Can DHEA help with increasing free testosterone? It can, and I've seen DHEA do really great things to help improve or boost testosterone in humans, and so it can. But the other question that I would encourage you to ask or have your doctor ask is, are there other nutrients that you may be lacking that is contributing to a lack of ability to convert pre-hormones into testosterone? So the early on, so remember that cholesterol, your body will take cholesterol and through multiple conversions will finally end up with testosterone. Are you missing key nutrients within that process that are slowing your ability to convert that cholesterol into testosterone? There are a number of drugs that interfere with that process. There are a number of nutrient deficiencies that can interfere with that process as well. Okay, let's see. Can gluten increase prostate problems? Yes. Where I've seen that be the case, particularly, Gene, is where gluten is creating an issue with malnutrition, and so like selenium deficiency and zinc deficiency I've seen linked, and I've seen really great things in men who've had benign prostatic hypertrophy and through the right supplementation have seen great improvements in their prostate size. Is there anything that can help when you don't have any hormones? I had a hysterectomy 12 years ago. Yeah, Mary, one of the things I would encourage you to do is follow up with a good doctor who specializes in hormone, prescribing hormones, because if you had a total hysterectomy, now if you had a partial and you still have your ovaries, you may still be making hormones, but if you had a total hysterectomy, it's a good idea to measure your levels, because if you're subphysiological, even as somebody potentially in menopause, you may still benefit from some hormone therapy, but that would be something you'd want to have measured and ascertained. Why are oysters good for increasing sexual arousal for women? Oysters are aphrodisiac mainly because of the zinc. Oysters are very, very rich in zinc, and so again, zinc is very, very important for sexual function overall. So any foods that are higher in zinc can and this is true of chocolate as well. Chocolate is a decent source of zinc. Oysters are a good source of zinc. Chocolate also has some other chemicals that can be arousing in nature. Hey, if you've got a functional medicine or health question that you'd like me to answer for you, make sure you send me an email, glutenology@gmail.com, and we'll do our best to create a video answer just for you. Have a great day.